Hi, I'm Kylie McMullan.
And I'm Paul Nixey.
And this is PR Today.
Welcome. In today's show, we're going to be talking about Lululemon and knowing your audiences.
Yeah, so let's get started with talking about Lululemon.
Lululemon, Vancouver success story, all over the world, international.
Growing rapidly.
Well-respected brand. Hit a bit of a road bump this year.
Yeah, a couple of them,
Yeah.
which I don't think is too unusual for such a rapidly growing brand that's really expanding, really ramping up distribution.
Right.
But kind of three things all at once. So the first thing that happened was the sheer pants.
The pants.
Which is like kind of a funny story. Like as
Right.
recalls go, not
Right.
the worst thing in the world, and a little bit humorous.
It was a little humorous. They took it with good grace. I think their shareholders were less than impressed, but the company itself reacted, their public relations team at least, reacted in a textbook way.
Yeah, I completely agree. They responded really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They admitted they had a problem. They, accepted full responsibility.
Yeah.
And they had some humor or some fun with it. Like they had those posters that said, we want to be transparent with
Right.
you. And
Right. Their CEO was available to talk to the media, and they were in constant contact with reporters and editors, giving them fact sheets, updating their website in real time. Their PR team was working around the clock on weekends. So it was really a good example of how you can turn a crisis into a situation that your customers kind of laugh with you at.
Yeah, and I would say, some people were even saying that perhaps all that media exposure, because they're expanding outside the Vancouver market, might have actually been good for them because it might have put them on people's radar.
Right. Yeah, that's. But they have had a series of high-profile departures lately as well.
Yeah.
So their CEO Christine Day, who came to them from Starbucks actually after many years there, she's just recently announced that she's leaving the company, and it was quite a shock to their investors and to media and to their customers actually.
Yeah, and I think what's been kind of surprising about that departure is it feels a little less transparent than the transparent pants situation.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of questions in the air about why. Is it because of the transparent pants?
Right.
Is it really personal issues? And not a lot forthcoming about, why, when a replacement's coming.
Right. They did take out an advertisement for the job that was quite funny, and
Yeah.
they got a lot of press out of it, which of course is another win for Lululemon. But it came on the same week that they were delisted. Or they chose to be delisted from the Toronto Stock Exchange.
Another big surprise to
Right.
shareholders.
Yeah. So do you think the company is in crisis, or do you think that this is just a series of growing pains?
My take on it's growing pains, and that they've decided to, pull off the Band-Aid in terms of bad news and kind of clump it all together,
Right.
so that the company can move past it.
Right.
That would be my take on it. What do you think?
I think so too. Yeah, I think it's the TSX delisting was a bit of a surprise, but it came, I think, the same week or the day after.
The day, I think.
The day of.
Yeah.
When Christine Day, their CEO, announced that she was leaving. So I think that they were maybe taking out the trash a bit, which is when you bury a story with in a bigger story. Or
I think
a
you're
bigger news
so
day.
right, because it could have had a lot more coverage if they
Right.
hadn't lumped those two things together.
Yeah, exactly. And they're still traded on the NASDAQ, so they're still actively being traded. Their shares are it's all happening, but
Yeah.
they were finding it was too expensive to be trading on the TSX.
So if they were your client, what would you recommend as a next move?
I think they need to change the channel. I think they need to get beyond the sheer pants thing, and they need to get beyond the questions of is there turmoil going on, and I think that a high profile CEO is one really good way to do that.
That's a great idea.
Everyone's watching to see who that is, right? So
Yeah.
So the pressure's on
To find the
on
ideal
Lululemon.
candidate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think not to let it drag on too long. I'm sure they're looking very actively and
Right.
trying to replace it soon, but the longer it is, the more questions I think people will have.
Right.
Is she really leaving? When?
I liked what they did with their help wanted ad. It's not CEOs of billion-dollar companies are not reading the want ads. This is not generally how Fortune 500 companies recruit people.
Yeah.
But I think it was kind of a way to invite their customers in a little bit and maybe try to open the kimono a bit.
Yeah, it was very cheeky and fun. Like, what did it say? Things like, the CEO must be able to do handstands or
must be comfortable alming at the
Oh, yeah.
office and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, very, very much a cultural fit for them.
Yeah.
You know, they have developed this corporate culture that as Vancouverites, we know you can't, you know, you can immediately spot a Lululemon
Yeah.
tag anywhere. So
for sure.
so I think that they're well positioned to take advantage of some of their recent missteps and turn it into a good news story.
No, I completely agree.
Now, we've just talked about Lululemon, and that's an example of a company that really knows its audience. So it's a perfect segue into our next segment, which is all about audiences.
Now, audiences is one of those things that sounds really obvious, that you would want to know your audience before you start communicating with them. But it's amazing how many companies don't put a lot of thought into their audience and just kind of try to target everybody.
Yeah, one of the first questions I ask when I'm working with a client is, who are you talking to?
Yeah.
And the answer 9 times out of 10 is, oh, well, everyone.
Yeah.
You know, we want it as far and as wide as possible. We want to reach every single person, and it's impossible to reach every single person.
I actually saw a funny advertising agency. They made like posters of their pet peeves of clients, and one of them said something like, our target audience is everyone from 0 to 99.
Right.
Which is how a lot of clients think.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't want anyone to be upset. But if you think about it, some of the best brands do alienate some people.
Sure.
Because they're so clear about who they want to talk to that they don't really care about the other people who aren't part of their audience.
Exactly, yeah. And if you don't know who your audience is, it's difficult to tailor a message.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is that if you're coming up with a public relations strategy and you don't have your audience nailed down, chances are you're not going to get as much pickup. You're not going to talk to the right people. Reporters won't know who's supposed to be targeted by this.
And it's going to land flat. You know, when it's something that's for everyone, it's kind of like pablum. It has no meaning anymore.
Right.
I'm trying to think of like a really great brand. I mean, other than a Lululemon who really knows their audience, I would say, you know, people like Nike, like
Right.
sports enthusiasts, they really nailed on the head like who they're talking to and who their advertisements and their public relations is geared to. It's hardcore sports people, and then, you know, that would be their primary audience who they speak to, but then because of that, it opens them up to a secondary audience, which might be people who dabble in sports but aren't as committed as the, you know, premier athletes.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I can wear a Nike T-shirt.
Yeah, and not feel bad about
and
it.
not feel bad about it. No. Another one, Iron Man.
Oh, yeah.
You know, these are people who target very specifically the weekend warrior. So we're talking usually men. We're talking over 35, annual incomes of over $100,000. So they've really got their market done, their market research done, and that's a really important part of knowing your audience. Is that good agencies and good PR firms will invest in a lot of research and time to understand who your audience is, so that you can tailor those messages.
That's actually a really good point. Is, you know, when determining your audience, it is sometimes, especially if you have a very small budget, a bit of a work in process. You talk to people, do mini focus groups. Is the message resonating? Okay, no, why not? Who would it be better targeted to? I was actually reading an interesting article today about PayPal. So they thought their audience was only Palm Pilot users, and the software they did was for people who had Palm Pilots, and it was a really sophisticated technology. And then they kept getting asked questions about people like from eBay,
Right.
and they're like, oh, like we'd really like you to like be able, like would you like to use PayPal on our eBay site?
Right.
And they're like, no, like that would be dumbing down our technology. We only want to do Palm Pilot people, even though there was only like 12,000 Palm Pilot users.
Right.
And so
I was one of them.
Oh, yeah. You were an early adopter?
Yeah, exactly.
And so they actually, like, at first thought, like, should we go Pilot route or should we do all these other people who are just on the internet? And they went the internet route, which was a genius. Like, now it seems so obvious, but apparently they really struggled with that decision.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Another good example of organizations that know who their audience is, political parties. Right?
Perfect example.
The Conservative Party of Canada knows that in the last election they wanted to get the suburbs around Toronto, so they came up with a target market of a mother who has a minivan, goes to soccer games. Her name is Jane. She spends X dollars on, you know, groceries and this and this and this, and they really, really fleshed out who their voter was, so that they could have, you know, messaging that spoke specifically to that person. And apparently in their war room they would say, would Jane like this?
Oh,
and
interesting.
it took on kind of this personality so that's you know, if you want to look at an organization or an industry that understands messaging, politics is a good place to start.
So podcast listeners, you've heard it here first. You need to think always about what would Jane want whenever developing any kind of communication tools from this point on.
What would Jane do?
What would Jane do? Thank you so much for joining us today on PR Today. We hope you enjoyed the show.
I had a great time. Thank you very much, Kylie.
Thank you, Paul.
That's
I had a great time as well. And next week we'll be talking about key messages, so make sure you tune in.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I'm Paul Nixey.
And I'm Kylie McMullan.